Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Knighted Ones podcast, episode number 16. We are the only podcast that features a former UCF National Champion, a former UCF radio host, and several podcasters shooting the breeze, talking UCF sports. And as always, this week, we're going to pick up some of our discussion from last week, which is, the whole college football playoff discussion. We'll talk some portal and who we lost, who's coming for visits, who we're looking to gain. And then, we'll transition to a little bit of hoops this week. We had a very exciting game we got to watch against Ole Miss. Unfortunately, it didn't end the way we wanted, but it was still an exciting game nonetheless. And certainly for me, gave me hope for the future as we transition into Big 12 play. So we'll talk about this week. Unfortunately, we will be without Trey Neal this week. He dumped us for the Miami Dolphins game. I'm not a Doll fan, so I'm going to blame him for that. But if I was, I wouldn't, and he is, so I won't. But that doesn't mean we don't have the rest of the guys back. We actually got Alan Levin back. He was on a little bit of sick leave for last week, so excited to have him back. But first, we'll bring in Nobra, the producer, who's been doing such a great job for us.
What's going on?
Yeah, you never know what to say when you say hello. Never. You're just like, hi.
No, brain just goes flat. It goes smooth.
Yeah, we got to do something for you. I think your brain's getting taken up by all that hair. So I don't know what's going on there, but we got to do something for an intro for you that's a little more excitable.
Yeah.
But Nobra's doing a great job for us running the back parts of I wasn't going to say the other part, so we didn't get a B already. Back parts of the production work for us, and we're excited to have him. Next, let's go ahead and bring in our good friend Alan Levin.
Hey.
Josh is making jokes about back parts production in the chat, but we got Alan Levin back. Super excited to see him on the mend. He was very, very sick. Felt really bad for him last week and the week before, but he caught something there and then caught something here. So he was down for the count for a couple weeks. Glad to have you back, my friend.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
All right. Awesome. You do look a little bit thinner, so I don't know.
Maybe. Yes, I haven't been eating much the last few days.
Yeah, that might be one of those that Nobra edits. All right, Josh, last but not least, we're going to bring Josh Lazar back to the stage. Welcome back, Josh.
See, Nobra, what you need to do is find a catchphrase. Phrase. So all you need to do is start with like, hey now, or something like that. You'll be fine.
Okay, yeah.
Glad to have everybody back. We want to start with a little bit of football this week. We still got some football to talk about. Soon enough, it'll be gone, and we'll be talking spring. We'll be talking about spring football. We'll be talking about spring games and the march and to a new season. So right now we're setting all the pieces in place for that new season with the transfer portal. Unfortunately, it's something that's kind of become part of college football. Before we had one signing period, then it became two signing periods, which our signing period will be 12/20. So we're hoping to hang on to all the 4 stars that we had signed and we're excited about for this class. And as we kind of transition into a new way of thinking, right? Because not only do we have that, but this year we also have the fact that the folks can transfer whenever they want. So that was another piece of that's gone. And this has led to an even bigger discussion on conference makeup. Last week, we heard the NCAA president come out and say, hey, why don't we just have another division of the NCAA and of college football, and we'll just create one where the the schools can pay the players through their NIL collectives, bring them in house, and those that don't want to participate can be in another subdivision, and also give them more autonomy with things like getting rid of the limits of, getting rid of the limits on the number of players you can bring in. And it harkens back to, what was said by Alabama great Bear Bryant, where he said, people asked him why he was stacking all these players. And he basically said, so that Auburn can't have a football team. And that's really the thought process. And I'm not even joking about it. That was his quote. It was like, I'm stacking all the Alabama football players. And even if they ride the bench, I've got 2 teams so that Auburn can't have one. And that was the thought process. And we're slowly sliding back to that. So there's a lot going on, as this has kind of evolved with the whole idea of the NIL. We talked a lot about that over the past couple of years on various podcasts about what the effects would be, how it would impact UCF. And now we're in the midst of it with basically a free transfer for everybody. And there's a lot to talk about here. So first of all, portal, transfer portal update. We kind of gave some updates last week. This week we have Keenan Cupid, Amari Johnson, Corey Thornton, which is probably the biggest loss we've had so far. Oh, yeah. And he just got picked up by Mississippi State. So it seems like we've got like a pipeline coming from UCF to Mississippi State lately with the lane train out there. Isaiah Paul, really didn't see him.
Ole Miss.
Or Ole Miss, I'm sorry. Mississippi State. I don't know why.
Mississippi State is the Libby. I don't know. I need another L car. I got one.
Yeah, Lebby is just Lebby.
The Lebby limo.
Lebby limo.
What was it?
The Lebby limo.
Lebby limo. Man,
the Lebby limo. Yeah.
Near
the Neckbeard Express.
Although we did have, I think Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste went to Ole Miss, right? Or did he go to Mississippi?
I think so.
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? Because we've got a lot of UCF players that leave and go to NIL and have gone to Ole Miss or Mississippi State. And really the only reason they've gone there is not to win. It's to be in the SEC and to make a little bag, which made more sense when we were G5. But now that we're Power 5, it's all about the bag. So Isaiah Paul we had on there. Really, he didn't get much playing time. Yeah. And Kervin's also leaving into the portal. So, again, biggest loss so far seems to be Corey Thornton. Javon Baker actually, he was talking about the bag. He had some tweets about the bag. We mentioned that in a previous episode. And now he came back with one basically saying, look out if the 3-headed monster comes back, basically talking about him, Kobe, RJ. Again, we kind of talked about last week that RJ was a heavy lean to stay. That seems to still be the case. I feel that if any of our heavy hitters were going to leave, unless it's to the NFL, we would have already heard them jump into the portal and into the fray, because that's where the biggest money is. And as people bring in these portal players, that budget is going to be less and less. So I'd imagine they've already felt those offers out and are in a position now where they're either probably going to stay. And we spent that week. Gus said he was going to spend that week making sure he's focusing on keeping the players they want to keep. And we're past that process now. What are you guys' thoughts on all of this? What's your read on how we fared thus far as portal losses are concerned? Alan, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I think this was so far, I mean, obviously it's not over. There's the window is still open for transferring, but I think this is the best we've ever done at retaining players in the last couple of years since the portal has been invented. We've seen some big losses in previous years, whether it's O'Keefe or Baptiste or Tatum Bethune, Dylan Gabriel, some just major program changing losses. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but, guys that were not only bona fide starters, but they were, all conference players that were leaving and then have not only gone on to have success at their new schools. I mean, Tatum Bethune led FSU in tackles the last 2 years. Dylan Gabriel obviously had some good years at Oklahoma. So those were really huge losses that you felt. And I kind of said last week or the week before that there may be some guys that we flinch at, and that's what we had with Corey Thornton. But if Corey Thornton ends up being our worst loss, I think we're in a great position. I know that UCF has 25 guys that they want to protect, and they do everything they can to keep them on the team with the NIL budget that they do have. If they can keep that three-headed monster that you alluded to, I think it's already a success. I mean, yeah, maybe they lose another defensive starter, maybe they lose another offensive starter, but if you can keep those three guys in place along with the defensive line starters that are all, entering their senior year, like Ricky Barber and some of these other guys, I think it's a massive win, and it speaks to an improvement in our NIL and what SJ is doing over there with the Kingdom and being able to accumulate the proper funds to retain our top talent, which I think is a testament to how far we've come in the last couple of years. And we're going to lose some guys. It's going to happen every year. But if you compare this to the last couple of years, when you lose a guy like all-conference Matt Lee, all-conference Dylan Gabriel, all-conference Ryan O'Keefe, that this is a big win for us. It's a shame that, that you basically have to recruit your own guys every single season. They don't just want to play at UCF for the sake of the black and gold and the letters on their chest, but that's the world that we live in now with NIL. So, but I think we should be proud of who we've been able to retain. I don't think it's over yet. I think there are going to be some more guys, maybe some other ones that quote unquote make us flinch again. But if we can keep that three-headed monster, we're in amazing shape going into next year, and it'd be a lot less worse than I originally anticipated. So I'm happy with the progress we made and the guys that we're keeping and the guys that are, proud and happy to stay at UCF. But I would want to caution that, let's see, because, we've seen in years past, even a guy like Jalen Robinson, who transferred after the spring game when the next portal window opened up. So there's still going to be time for that. But I do believe that UCF has made a stand to keep these top guys. And I think at least a good portion of them are going to stay.
Well, and what's crazy about that is, if I told you, I don't know, 3-4 years ago, or even 5 years ago, UCF would have what's rumored to be around a $3 million NIL budget, right, at their disposal to keep guys, you would have laughed at me. I mean, raising $3 million, from our fan base, that's a tough ask. I mean, even when we're funding things like the Lazy River and everything else, that's a huge amount of money. What's that?
Especially for a younger alumni base that doesn't have old money like some
exactly.
Other
I mean,
schools.
That's a huge ask, right? And we've managed to maintain that, and we seem to be a player. Now, are we, where even Texas Tech is right now? No. But a lot of these other programs, we are within range, and I think what you're starting to see in the portal is kind of positioning where UCF is. We were at a huge disadvantage before having that G5 tag. So now having that P5 tag, plus having a little bit of money to spend and being able to focus on the key players that we want to keep, I think that is a plus, because as you said, in between coaching, in between development, in between scholarships, in between recruiting to begin with, we spend a lot of money on these guys to bring them in. And we've basically got an, almost unrestricted free agent market now that we're having to roster manage. It's not about developing. It's not about getting the right mix of who you're bringing in and then having development anymore. People ask why people aren't developing anymore. Can't keep them. They're going to the next highest bag, and not everybody's successful. I mean, the example you used with, I just lost his name, the
Matt
receiver.
Jalen Robinson.
Yeah, Jalen Robinson. He didn't do anything the next year, right? And then the following year, he went to a middling ACC team and was very mid. Had he stayed here, no, I'm serious. He was mid. He had like 300 or 400 yards receiving or something like that, which is not what you get as a feature player at UCF. And at some point, you're going to have to understand that, hey, you've got an offense here that's got a 1,000-yard receiver and a 700, 800-yard receiver, so almost 2,000-yard receivers, plus what we were doing in the running game. You have the opportunity to be a feature player that's going to put up a lot of yards here that you wouldn't have at a lot of other teams. And how does that go into that mix for you when you're making that decision, right? I think that is a positive for UCF and having such a successful team. All right.
And he had his best season. Jalen Robinson at the end of the day had his best season at UCF.
Exactly. All right, Josh, what's your take on how we've done thus far in the circus that is NIL drama?
And Alan stole I was about to say Alan stole all the thunder because he's right. I mean, so far, right? We haven't had anyone that we would probably see on the field every single play or 50 or 60 plays all the time, except for Corey Thornton, right? And I get it. We've been there. Bethune left. Jean-Baptiste left. People who are getting those types of numbers sometimes leave, and sometimes they do great things, and sometimes they don't. And I think a lot of players around the country are understanding and seeing this a little bit more. I saw some graphic recently on some social media where there's like 106 or 100 and some odd quarterbacks in the portal, and there's like 133 teams, right? So at some point the carousel is going to have to stop, and for some, maybe it would have been better to stay where you're going to stay. So and listen, students generally leave colleges if they have different situations. Forget athletes, because sometimes they want a better education, or sometimes family circumstances do that, right? So even student athletes might leave not just for money, right? And a lot of them probably are leaving from the group we have now. And Alan has I was trying to look it up on X, formerly known as Twitter, had a good list. I think he was keeping track of it on his X account. And, if you look at that, a lot of guys probably just want to find time, maybe moving up, maybe moving down. That's nothing wrong with that either, right? And there's some parts of the beauty of what's going on now. And I don't think there's a lot, but one of them is that someone who wants to get time has that opportunity. But then you have the other side, of course, of that scale where you pretty much have mercenaries, right? Going after money, which I don't blame anyone doing that. But you have like Dylan Gabriel's going to Oklahoma and stayed there for a couple of years, got really good. He's a good player in the system. The schemes
he played about the same. The only thing he added to his game, finally, he was able to be a little bit more mobile.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
just had a bigger stage.
Trying to get him to do that his first 2 years here, right? Like that was missing here too. Listen, he'll probably do well in Oklahoma. That's right. Well, did well in Oklahoma. He's probably do well in Oregon, and that's okay too. There's room for that as well. But for us as a team, so far what we've seen, I think we've done as well as we can ask for, and I hope that there's a mix of guys wanting to stay here to play at UCF, guys who want to stay here because they're getting money to play at UCF, as we talked about, not in that sport, but in basketball last week with Chance McSpadden, that we got a little hint on. But that's okay too. That's life. Now, I will say, in the back of my mind, some of these athletes might be making more to play football than I make as a professor at UCF, or instructor, really. And part of me is like, is that right? But that's where we're at right now. TV money is not paying for me to educate students at UCF.
Well, and that's just it, right? What's your in a free market? What's your value to the school, right? And that's what it boils down to. No, I mean, not as an educator, but I mean, how much revenue do you actually generate for the school, depending on how many people you're teaching and et cetera, right? And how much the school earns from those credit hours. So at the end of the day,
1,400 students a semester.
I understand that, but how much does that translate to versus the TV exposure if you have a good team to the school, if you're playing not on ESPN Plus every weekend, or you make it to the championship game, or you make it to the playoff, or a New Year's Six Bowl, or whatever.
I understand.
The point for me, though, that I think you made that's important is
I did?
Yes. Hold on. and I'll get to it.
Okay.
But the point that's important for me is the differentiation between starters leaving and role players or backups leaving, right? The starters, when they leave, are looking for either a bigger stage or a bigger bag. Most of them are going to be the latter half of that, right? I think UCF's a big enough stage, right, where they can get the exposure that they need, and they've got the tools. Even though the 6-6 doesn't reflect that, I think they've got the tools offensively to do really, really well. And I think that's really the difference. Is it's, you know, when those starters who have the playing time, who have the opportunity to be great, who now have the platform to be able to make it to the playoff. I mean, not like they would at Alabama, but certainly much better than what you would get at Mississippi State. You know, I think for them, I think the sweet spot for that, for those starters, are the ones that are probably going to be undrafted free agents and or late round picks, or they come back a year for a bag, they graduate, they move somewhere else, and capitalize on that when they can, and then go into the draft, and whatever happens. So I think what you're seeing is a lot of movement along that. And kind of talking about that brings us to a very visible visitor that was on campus this week. And it was kind of in that situation. And that's Coastal Carolina quarterback Grayson McCall, who visited over the weekend. If you went to the Hoops game, he was in section 118 there with we pulled out all the stops. You had Christy Malzahn. You had, of course, Coach Malzahn. You had Coach Henshaw. RAD Terry Mohajer was there. And, you know, they were pulling all the stops out for Grayson. He was at Coastal Carolina. He would have transferred last year. There were some hangups with some transfer credits where he couldn't transfer last year. He went, finished, graduated. He has 1 year left. He's made a lot of noise. He seems to be a really good football player, did well at Coastal. And now he's looking for both the platform and I think more the platform than anything else to get up his opportunities to be in the NFL. So UCF would be a good opportunity for him. The other major player right now is South Carolina. Or not South Carolina, I'm sorry. Wow, I'm off today. NC State. You know, it's
Carolina somewhere there, right?
Yeah, exactly. NC State. Now, he is a Carolina kid, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, we talk about how UCF has a lot of advantages with us being from Florida and the number of players that come out there and the ones that leave the state of Florida and want to come back. In this case, it actually works against us because he is from the Carolinas. So he was here over the weekend. He went back. There's no conversation yet on where he's going to go. But that would be a huge opportunity for us if he did come in, because he is a true dual threat, larger size, has the ability to run, and has a pretty good arm on him. So he would be a good transition for us from JRP until we have some of our young freshman high school prospects that are coming in for 2024 and 2025. EJ Colson, Trujillo, a lot of those guys that are expected to take the reins. Barring that, if we don't have like a 1 year type quarterback, you've got Timmy McClain as well, who may end up leading the ship. But it's pretty clear that we're shooting for an experienced quarterback that we can plug and play and kind of get us through this year or this next season before we get into the younger high school players that we have coming in. So what do you guys think about Grayson McCall? Have you guys watched any of his film? I mean, I'm sure Alan has. I don't know if Josh has. Alan, what's your take on that?
I think this would be arguably like the biggest QB we've ever gotten in the portal since the portal era starts. I mean, unless you consider JRP, a bigger get, or Brandon Wimbush, I guess by name or whatever. But, I've watched him for 4 years at Coastal Carolina. I always admired his game. Like you said, he's a dual threat quarterback. This is a guy that's thrown for over 10,000 yards and 88 touchdowns in his career. I'm going to be honest with you. Before Grayson McCall was at Coastal Carolina, I had never even heard of Coastal Carolina as a school. And now in the last 4 years, this is a team that's racked up 38 wins. They've had 2 11-win seasons, been the SunBelt champions 3 times in the last 4 years, gone to a New Year's Six game. I mean, this is a program that he really helped turn around. Yes, you could say Jamie Chadwell was a big part of that as the head coach, but the 2 previous seasons prior to McCall being there, Coastal Carolina was 5-7 and 5-7. He gets there. They have back-to-back 11-win seasons, then a 9-win season. Like I said, 38 wins over the last 4 years. I think this would be a massive get. Not only is he experienced, he's extremely talented. He's size-wise, he's a standard QB size, bigger than a guy like JRP, but has that dual threat, that mobility that we want to keep in Gus Malzahn's offense. So I think this would be a massive get for us. And if we can, the fact that he's narrowed it down to us in NC State, a school that's close to home for him, still in the Carolinas, that would be a big win on the recruiting trail for us. I think just being able to beat out a fellow Power 5 like NC State, who's had some pretty damn good quarterbacks over the years. So I would absolutely love for him to transfer here. I think that would be a game changer for us next season, especially if we keep that, that 3-headed monster that we keep referring to. He's got guys, the weapons he would have with Baker and Hudson returning and Townsend and maybe some other transfer wide receivers that would be more attracted to come to UCF because McCall is coming here. I think it would be absolutely a game changer for us next year. I think we all thought next year as a transition season, but when you throw someone like McCall into the mix, I think he'd be a bona fide QB1 and one of the best QBs we've had here probably since Gabriel left. So I'd be really amped up to get him here. I think he's got an incredible game that I've watched a lot of Coastal games, some of those SunBelt weekday games, and watched him in the New Year's Six Bowl. And they've had quite a few amazing seasons under him and Chadwell. So I would love for him to transfer to UCF.
Awesome. So what we've learned is Alan's a really big fan, and that he watches a lot of SunBelt football. So there you go.
It's on the weekdays. It's easy to watch. What else is there to watch?
Well, there's a reason they call it the Fun Belt, right?
The Fun Belt, exactly.
All right. Josh Lazar, thoughts on Grayson McCall?
2020 Player of the Year of SunBelt is
McCall.
2021 SunBelt Player of the Year is
McCall. And 2022.
2022 SunBelt Player of the Year is Grayson McCall. Now, the SunBelt is a pretty darn good conference right now. They probably usurped most of the other G5 conferences, the ones that we've been in, better than the CUSA, probably better than the AAC, maybe, right? And then they're going to be losing SMU too. When's the last time? I don't care what division, I don't care what conference, that a 3-time Player of the Year of a conference decides, yeah, we're going to move and we can get them. So Here's the thing. I don't know how this is going to end up. There's a lot of people saying NC State. If you want to play for a top 10 offense, you're going to be able to put up the numbers that you want to go to the next level, which is what he wants to do. NC State, good team, right? I have nothing against NC State. I have a lot of friends who are fans of NC State. We've talked ball for a long time. Is a solid program, usually in and out, not huge. They're not going 13-0 all the time, but not most people in North Carolina aren't as football teams. But if he wants to make money in the future and make some money now, I think there's an obvious choice if it's down to NC State and UCF. But he is from Carolina, and maybe he wants to stay closer to home. Don't know. But if he wants to follow the bag now and the bag later, I think we're the obvious choice. I don't think NC State is going to all of a sudden become a top 10 offensive team, and you already know what you have with Gus Malzahn. Maybe, again, maybe he's just, being a shrewd business person, and I wouldn't blame him for it, figuring out what he's worth in two different organizations and pitting them against each other. That happens. Coaches do it, right, all the time. Players are probably doing it now too. And sometimes it happens as employees of companies. So at the end of the day, personally, I think we're the better fit for him for now and the future. But we'll see. It's up to him, and hopefully we'll know by the next podcast.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thought is that we'll know within the next 24 to 48 hours. So you guys might know before you hear this podcast, because Dover's going to have to do a little editing. But, I do agree with you guys. I don't think – so, Alan, when you said, is he a bigger transfer quarterback than JRP for us, right? I think that at the time, JRP was a wide receiver,
Correct,
and unproven commodity. So when it came to him transitioning over, I think that there wasn't as much noise around him, right? Whereas there's a lot of noise. Sorry, guys, if you're watching the video version of this, there's been a lot of noise and press about McCall, because he has performed really, really well. And I do think he would fit well within our system, right? And he's a larger framed quarterback. So he will definitely, be able to sustain those hits and hopefully make it an entire season, unlike JRP. And that was the big thing with JRP, because he didn't slide as much, right?
When's the last time we had a 6'4", 6'5" quarterback, Blake Bortles? I mean, we've gone through a string of shorter QBs, McKenzie, DG, JRP. I mean, this would be the tallest, more traditional standard QB that we've had since Bortles, probably.
Durable and dynamic. That's what makes him different, right? Is he's durable because he is, because of his size, and then at the same time he's also dynamic because he could run and throw the ball pretty well. As Alan put it, he's a good thrower. So
he's a good passer.
Yeah. Well, we had some fun with that last week. So I agree with all that. And honestly, going back to what Alan was saying, and you talking about taller, bigger framed quarterbacks, every quarterback you listed from McKenzie on to JRP have all been hurt. And I hate that. Forget the team. I hate that for them. That's, no one wants to be hurt as a quarterback or in any other position. But McKenzie hurt and hurt his career. And I know he's living a great fulfilled life, and I hope he does the best. But his playing abilities got hurt. DG, that was one tackle changed his life, and you could say for the positive, gave him an out, got him some money, and hopefully he gets a bag and maybe he plays
Jeff
well in
Lebby. He followed Jeff Lebby. That let's just be real about that.
Yes, but he also
left either way.
He was a healthy scratch at the end of the season to preserve his red shirt, which probably got him an extra $1 million in NIL at the end of the day. And then JRP, JRP at full strength or even 80% strength for an entire season would have changed the last 2 years. So I think, and it's interesting. We were talking about the Texas Tech transfer that didn't
Tyler Shuck.
Yeah, Shuck. And
which I did say correctly, by the way, last week on the playback. So you guys need to get your hearing checked.
He got hurt a lot, and who knows what will happen in Louisville. I again wish him the best. Hope he doesn't get hurt. All the players don't, but McCall might be the next quarterback to play an entire season at UCF if he comes here. It would be nice to see for everyone. Including, staying healthy as an athlete.
It's interesting you said that about the health, because I also did a post on a page a few months ago that was the last time we've had a quarterback remain healthy in back-to-back seasons was Bortles in 12 and 13. Every quarterback we've had since 2014 has been injured in like when they're either in their first season playing or in their second season playing, or they were replaced. Like in Keen's instance, he didn't get injured, but he was replaced. So we actually haven't had a quarterback play 2 full seasons in a row since Bortles did in 12 and 13. And 90% of that has been from injuries, whether it was Holman getting injured or McKenzie or DG. So it's been a wild ride. It'd be nice to have a QB finish out a season, stay healthy. And I think we could have that, like you said, with McCall.
All right. So now that we've kind of talked about one position of need, let's think about, what else does UCF really need? Obviously linebackers. Wow. I got it in there right before you did, Josh. But clearly that's a position of need, but we've been talking about that for the last couple of, I'd say 2 or 3 seasons, right?
Yeah.
It's really been linebackers being an area of need. I think, we could definitely use a safety or so, right? Because we, 1 for depth and 2 for downhill tackling. I also obviously, pieces on the defensive end position. We've got some guys that we can rotate in there that are showing some promise, but that's a younger position. So we could use a defensive or more experienced defensive end as well as kind of like a stopgap. Ultimately making sure that we have a couple of linemen that we can stick in there as well, because we have some good offensive linemen. But I think that we need like 1 or 2 more anchors for, a really solid rotation, especially, that we're now playing in the Big 12 and the defensive lines are, larger individuals, right? They're larger players that we're playing against. So I think depth is going to be important there. We got kind of lucky this year. And then for D-line, we've got Walker, we've got Lee Hunter. We may not have Barber because he was hurt. He may want to go get a bag somewhere else. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Barber with those 3. But that rotation's a pretty solid rotation where you can give each of those guys a little bit of a breather with those 3 guys. So
yeah,
few folks that were also on campus. Former 2022 top 50 recruit defensive back Kamari Wilson. So that would be a big get for us. Also from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, Jadarius Perkins. Both of those 2 were Florida players, and he's a safety. So that would be a good opportunity for both of them. Both of them had playing time last year at Florida, so they're not slouches. And I think that would be a good fit for us. And surprisingly enough, a couple of Cincinnati players.
Yeah, some good ones too.
Yeah, Miles Montgomery, who did a great job against our defense and is a very, very strong running back. He's compact, but he's very, very strong and is pretty quick. So that he's a good running back. Although I don't know with our running back depth where he slots in there unless somebody else leaves that we don't know about. And then Deshaun Pace, that's another big safety, and that's huge. Now he's got a lot of interest from a lot of different places because he's a very, very good player. But if we could somehow land him, that would be an instant upgrade on defense over what we have right now, and let the guys kind of mature a little bit. The young guys that are coming in. So what do you guys think as far as, I guess, Alan, what other positions of need do you see for UCF and what we need to fill in the portal?
Yeah, I was actually creating a post today about what we need. And I actually think you could make a case that we need every single position we have a need at, maybe besides like special teams. Obviously went over quarterback, running back. I think if we keep RJ Harvey, obviously the need lessens, but you talk about you never know if Johnny Richardson's going to transfer. He's been kind of unhappy with his playing time over the past couple seasons. And you have a guy like Mark Anthony Richards who could graduate, and you already had Jordan McDonald transfer. So that's why I think we're in the running for, or we're hosting a Cincinnati running back, because
I would say we could use some depth in special teams the way that they played last year towards the end of the season.
Fair enough. Yeah. So running back, I think we could use a guy there. Wide receiver, that's up in the air, but we've already had 4 wide receivers transfer. So you talk about depth and the fact that we missed on our wide receiver transfers last year, and the fact that Baker and Hudson, this is definitely going to be their last year if they stay. So we're going to need some wide receiver transfers. And that's why you've actually seen in our upcoming recruiting class, we have 5 wide receivers in this class. So if we keep them all, the need is a little bit lessened, but I would like to bring in an experienced wide receiver. Tight end, I think, is a massive need. You have both the Holler brothers leaving and Zach Wojan leaving. So really it just leaves Randy Pittman there. So I think we could use an experienced tight end. And then I think O-line after a linebacker is actually our second biggest need. Yes, we still have some talent there, but you have Paule, arguably our best lineman, leaving. You have Bula Schmidt, who graduated, and then you had the Drake Metcalf already announced that he's transferring. So that's like 3/5 of our starting lineup gone. So really it's just Marcellus Marshall.
Yeah, but they all 3 of them played center this year.
Yeah, but I think, I still think we need to fill in some lineman spots there, though. I think that is a need for us personally. You already went over the defensive end, which I agree with. And then obviously linebacker and safety. But I would say really, I think we need the biggest needs to me are O-line, linebacker, quarterback. And then I think you can always use a couple more wide receivers. That's an area where I don't think we've been anywhere as deep as we were in 17, 18, 19. So I think we have some needs there. And this is the first time we really don't have like that veteran presence at tight end either, because we've had like Holler and we've had, Kamari Gamble and guys like that have been veteran presences at the position, Jordan Akins. We're not going to have that for the first time in a while. So there's definitely some depth pieces, I think, across the board. But like we said, I think linebacker, quarterback, and O-line are really the biggest needs.
All right, Josh Lazar, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we need. I will say from what Alan's perspective is, I think we're saying we need everything. Because we need some depth, and there's definitely that's the difference between the American and Big 12. Because when a QB goes down, you need someone. I mean, there's a couple teams, right? We'll talk about this later, but Florida State, whether it's right or wrong, and we'll get into it, isn't in the playoffs this year because Jordan Travis got hurt, which is.
I would argue it wasn't just Jordan Travis that got hurt, but their second string quarterback got hurt too, and they managed 75 yards against the Gators.
Yeah.
50 yards passing.
At the end of the day, I guess winning doesn't count. But that's why you need depth, right? We definitely didn't have depth at linebacker. We definitely need more depth at tight end. I'm regurgitating some of Alan's stuff because usually he's pretty dead on this. But we can use anyone who will either push people in practice and get better competition, who will be great teammates and help build awesome cohesive units, people who will be the next man up. And we can use that pretty much across the board. I don't think there'll be any time where we're like, we're fine. Now, that's the interesting part is we have a lot of, and hopefully they sign, right? A lot of great high school players that are looking to join us relatively soon within the next 6 months or less. So that's going to be interesting too, because we saw this year there are a significant amount of freshmen that are playing and playing well. And I think the people who either redshirted or those will also bring their game up too. And I'm wondering how many of these between the transfers that come in and the high school players that might be good enough to play, maybe not week 1, but maybe close. So we could use help everywhere, and hopefully we get people that are great in the locker room and just good people. That's my hope.
Can I just add one? I just want to add one more point, if you don't mind, Roger.
I do. I'm 100%.
Another reason why I think it's important that we didn't mention is 16 out of 22 starters this year were seniors. and 9 of those 16 have exhausted their eligibility or gone. So we're 100% losing 9. The remaining 7 are the ones that are remain to be seen, like a Baker, Hudson, Harvey. So either way, we are losing 9 out of 16, and then after this year, an additional 7. So we talked about how we were a senior laden team this year. We're losing a lot of players just through exhausting their eligibility. So the need for transfers is there just purely because of that. So we got to bring in some guys to replace, potentially 16 starters and at the very least 9.
Yeah, which is crazy because we were this past year were brought back. We were one of the teams that brought back some of the most starters, right?
Correct.
So it'll be interesting to see how that impacts everything. However, if you start bringing portal guys in that are experienced, you kind of gain some of that back, except that now they have to learn our system, right? So it's an interesting conundrum when it comes to that. Now, Josh, although Alan ruined it with his comment, it was a great comment. Josh had a great lead-in for us for our next point in the discussion, which was the college football playoff. What you guys didn't see is I said to Josh, "Hey, Josh, try to be brief so that we can move on to the next thing." And Alan
didn't even look at it, and I was just trying to be.
I saw it, but I couldn't. I had to bring that point up.
He couldn't help himself.
Yeah,
Alan just brings all the knowledge, so that's all that is. But that's okay. I'm okay with that. So let's kind of talk. We talked about it last week. We started to talk about it. Unfortunately, we won't have a Trey yells at cloud segment this week because Trey's yelling at the Dolphins right now at a boring game at 7-7. And he missed out on all of this greatness for a boring game. So what we're going to do now instead is talk about that FSU snub and whether the four right teams were selected for the playoff. And obviously this kind of cuts deep for UCF fans because of our experience in 2017 and quite frankly 2018 till McKenzie got hurt, right? Because there was a lot of noise about us being kept out even after that. And the talking points, I've listened to a lot of national noise about this week, and the debate really is are the rules defined well enough for the committee? Number one. Number two, is it the 4 best teams in the moment, right? Or is it, teams that were undefeated? So when you're talking about the human element that's kind of sprinkled into this, I think it's a double-edged sword when it comes to the FSU situation, right? Because if you realistically looked around based on how FSU's offense was performing, and they weren't a world beater offense, they were in a lot of close games earlier on in the season too, but they did get better, and their defense matured partly thanks to Tatum Bethune anchoring that middle linebacker spot for them. But they really weren't world beaters, but they did get better. And then all of a sudden, they lost not 1, but 2 quarterbacks in the span of a couple of games. And, obviously we've talked about Jordan Travis. Everybody knows what his situation is. His backup, which wasn't ready, but could arguably be thought of as a better option, for at least keeping the offense cohesive enough and scoring enough yards and points to say, hey, yeah, they can do well in the playoff situation against these other top teams at that time. So the question becomes, for the playoff, is it the 4 best teams at that time, or in spite of everything, overcoming everything and being being an undefeated team. And that was the same way for UCF. I mean, we had Mackenzie Milton before for most of the season, and then we lost him against the Cows, right? And that hit. So all of a sudden, now we have the championship game. We've got our backup quarterback playing, who does fairly well, wins us the game, and did really well against LSU, by the way, and a team that was led by Joe Burrow, and had, I think it was like 17 or 18 NFL players on it. and was the national champion the following year. So, our team with our backup showed that we could still compete. And almost we were within, 7-8 points of winning that LSU game. And really, if Burrow hadn't came back, after Joey Connors knocked him out, and he really shouldn't have come back. And I'll say that till I'm blue in the face. We would have won that game. All the momentum was there. So I think for UCF, we had a good enough backup quarterback who was a starting quarterback before, right? Who came in and led us through an AAC championship game, and then led us in with LSU. Now, how much did TCU stinking it up in the championship game, although they had to win to get there, influence that decision? Was it a TV decision, or is it really the best matchups that we could get for the teams and their rosters at that time? Thoughts, Alan?
I think the whole system's a freaking sham, and it pisses me off. It really does. Just
wow.
Like it's ridiculous. There's no other sport in the entire world where you could go undefeated and not go to the playoffs. Literally, obviously you can't go undefeated in like an NBA or the NHL, but I'm just making a point. Like if you're undefeated in college basketball, if you're undefeated in any other sport, you are guaranteed 100% objectively you are in the playoffs. There's no scenario where that doesn't happen. College football is the only place where you could be undefeated and you have a subjective team of group of 13, 14 people judging and saying you can't get in. I think personally it should be, if you're undefeated in a Power 5 conference, you're in. Then that's it. Like I don't care if Alabama is technically better than Florida State. They lost and Florida State didn't. And also the manner that Florida State won in has come under scrutiny, which is ridiculous. You won with your backup quarterback and you won with defense. Why does it matter how you win? It shouldn't. They won. I think it's even more impressive that they won with their backup quarterback, mind you, against a top 15 Louisville team. It's not like they beat some crap team in the conference championship. They beat a top 15 Louisville team with a very impressive defensive showing. And they won the game before that against Florida with their second string. And then they won this game, their conference championship game, which is arguably a tougher game than Florida, with their third string quarterback. To me, that whether you want to call it deserving or best, I don't really care. They need to be in the playoff because they got the win against a quality opponent. And I also think there's no consistency in this. I guarantee you right now, if Clemson was in the same exact scenario, undefeated, and they won the conference championship against the same teams, ACC, with their backup quarterback, Clemson is in the playoff right now. I have no doubt in my mind. I think it comes down to brands, and that's where we're.
So are you saying that so that Clemson is a superior brand to FSU? Is that what you're saying right now?
I think that's how the committee would view it. Yes, I do. I do think that they've won 2 championships in the last, 6-7 years. They've been to the playoffs 4 or 5 times out of the last 7 years. So yes, I do think the committee would view them in a better brand, and they would have more national recognition, which is absurd because Florida State's a 3-time national championship program. They're one of the most prestigious programs in the country. So I think it's an absolute sham that because they won with their backup quarterback. Who cares? Yes, obviously they're a worse team with their backup quarterback in, but it doesn't matter. You play on the field, and if you can beat a top 15 Louisville, I don't know that they couldn't beat whoever they would have faced, Texas or Alabama, with their backup. Why not? Maybe it would have been a fully defensive game. And on top of that, when we talk about the best performances or having the best games, how many playoff games in the history of the playoffs since 2014 have ended in blowouts? So many. Notre Dame's been blown out. Florida State got blown out by Oregon. LSU blew out everyone they played that year when they were the best. Ohio State's been blown out. Alabama's been blown out by Clemson. Like there's been actually more blowouts in the playoffs than there has been close games. There's been very few games that have ended in legendary games besides like maybe Alabama, Georgia, and a couple of these other ones. But there's been so many blowouts in the history of the 10-year playoff that to sit there and be like, oh, well, it could be a blowout is ridiculous because that happens literally every single season. So I think FSU got absolutely screwed. And the playoff needs overhaul, which I guess is happening with a 12-team playoff. But when you talk about
that brings up an interesting point for my next question, which I already wrote on the notes if you see it. So
Yeah, it's just when you talk about most deserving versus best, I don't care. If you're undefeated, you are one of the best teams. So call it deserving, call it best. You need to be in that playoff, and it's unfair. It doesn't make any sense. And I'm sorry, Alabama lost and Texas lost. And if you want to talk about bad losses, Texas lost to an Oklahoma team that ended up losing 3 games this year. So
and Alabama lost to Texas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So and then on the flip side of that, if we're really going to talk about the best 4, if you really want to make the case that Florida State isn't a top 4 team without Jordan Travis, I can somehow get on board with that. But there's no way that Georgia, who won 29 straight games, all of a sudden is the 6th best team. No.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about the 4 best teams,
I agree with that. I think if they were going to do that, Georgia over Alabama 100%, but they were in a tough spot because Alabama beat Georgia in the last game right before, this was all
right. So it's a recency bias, and Georgia isn't, of course, Georgia is one of the best 4 teams in the country. There's 100%. If they play Alabama again, they could win. If they would have put Georgia in this playoff, I could easily see no one would be like, oh my God, they lost Alabama and then they won 2 straight to win the championship. No one would be surprised. So the fact that Georgia dropped from 1 to 6 is an absolute sham in itself. So I think the whole system's crap and I hate it.
Wow. All right. I think that whole rant was an outtake. So I think Nobra, please make sure that we get that whole thing, whether we split it up in clips, because there were places where we could stop it or not. I think one of the other things that you mentioned that, and Josh, I'm going to sprinkle this in too, right before you speak too.
Great.
Is consistency in the committee, because they rotate. And so the committee's decision-making and what they see in 2017 versus what they value and what they see and what it takes to get in 2023 are 2 completely different things.
Yeah, all I'll say is this. I mean, FSU should be upset. Georgia should be upset. Georgia should probably be more upset than FSU if you're talking about who is the last one in. But now we're just kind of mincing the absurdity of what's going on here. And honestly, it's been all over social media. Welcome to the club. UCF was the best team for a significant amount of time, for at least 2 years. And because of labels, it's what it is. And I guarantee you, Trey would say, if he were right now, that 2017 team would have beaten anyone. And honestly, I agree with him. I mean, so
there's a difference between would have and could have, right? So could they have or would they have?
I think they would have. And I think they could have both. And the reality is this FSU team, even with Rodemaker, probably had a darn good shot, because that defense was smothering the last 2 games. Now, it is UF, and UF, not the UF of Urban Meyer times, right? But still, what they did to get past everyone, UF, Louisville, they did amazing work. And I feel bad for FSU fans. I do, but now they feel like us. And that's one of the things, I think the worst part of the entire thing in the long term is now FSU and UCF are going to be connected because of this snub and because of undefeated seasons and not getting a shot. I think their fans are not happy about that.
Well, FSU fans said at the time, we should just join a better conference.
Yeah.
Well, we did, and they didn't.
Yeah.
What's interesting how they primed this whole thing the last 2 weeks. I didn't even consider Travis's injury as a thing that would even be considered. I really didn't. It was so funny. My brother went to Florida State, and he started saying oh man, I'm worried we're gonna get. I'm like, what do you mean you're worried? You guys are undefeated Power 5. And then I started listening to ESPN. They started just slowly priming. Oh, well, Jordan Travis are that. I didn't even consider that. I don't think it should matter. So when I started saying they were priming that for the last 2 weeks to basically, so it wasn't as big of a surprise, which is, I still think is total crap.
Well, last thing before we transition to hoops, right? One of the things that I wanted to kind of talk about there too is, did the ACC's participation in the alliance have anything to do with it? Because it was the Big Ten, the Pac-12, which basically doesn't exist anymore, right? And the ACC. And so with the ACC making so much noise and stopping the playoff, which would have been a 12-team playoff this year and allowed FSU to be in, did they A, shoot themselves in the foot by doing that, or B, is it a little bit of payback?
A, yes, B, no. They're that much, that level of, so yes, they shot themselves in the foot by not getting the 12.
And before you go down that point, I'll just remind you of the Big East. And that's all I'll say about that. As to whether that has anything to do with it or not, because think about it this way: ESPN is not profitable until the ad revenue comes in from the playoff. Had they had 12 spots while they were still the only game in town, because going forward they're not going to be, right? Had they had 12 games in the playoff, that would have been worth more for an ad revenue than it would have for, all of these ESPN owned bowls, the 29 ESPN owned bowls. So had they had 12 playoff games plus, well, not 12 6 playoff games plus, right? They would have made a lot more money, and they still own the playoff this year, and that's about to change. So I don't know about that. I mean, they're going to maximize with brands. I think it did have an influence.
I'm hoping
as far as the media narrative.
But that whole alliance thing is so funny in hindsight, because all of us here are business owners, and you do something like that without a contract. Ooh, that's not a good idea. But besides that, so do I think FSU perhaps led itself to this point because they didn't, as a part of the alliance, agree to this 12-team playoff this year? Absolutely. There's 0% chance they're left out of the 12-team conference. And honestly, a 12-team playoff. And honestly, if you look at the top 8, or if you get a little bit deeper, that would have been a really good playoff. I mean, there's a lot of solid teams, 1-loss teams, maybe 1-2-loss team that really, really had a shot. And it'd be interesting to see Liberty, I guess, would be in the playoff, I think, right? If we're maybe, I don't know how that
they
works,
wouldn't be very long, but they would be. I still think they're going to get murked in their game, honestly.
Yeah.
It's going to be over with before it started. But they said the same thing about us in the Fiesta Bowl.
Yeah. Well, also UConn, but we saw how that happened. The reality is, I think they hurt themselves by not advocating for a 12th. I think all of college football got hurt by not having the 12-team playoff this year. But do I really think there's this, I wouldn't say even conspiracy theory, but is there enough there to say, no, this was the ESPN saying, sorry, you lost us a lot of money, we're not going to let you in? I have to hope the answer is no. How about that? I hope the answer is no.
You live in your hopium. I will say this. The media narrative was pushing up against that in the lead up, as Alan was alluding to. So I'm not saying they directly told the committee, hey, this is what you're going to do. But I am going to say ESPN probably made it clear that we want the best brands as the interpretation this year. And that turned into the best teams right now. And I definitely think that hurt FSU's, just like our narrative, how we got, we had that artificial ceiling in 2017 and 2018 so that we couldn't, no matter what happened, make it into the playoff. Alan?
I was going to, just before Alan goes, I would say objectively, I know Alabama right now is a bigger brand than FSU, but I actually think FSU in the playoffs would have actually possibly brought in more money. It's a more compelling story than Alabama, in my opinion, because Alabama to me has been there, done that over and over and over again, whether deserved or not. FSU is the undefeated team. I mean,
I'd say from a marketing standpoint and a branding narrative, I don't agree with you.
I think that Florida State is a massive brand. I think they're getting like also snubbed in that. I mean, there's a 3-time national championship program that's been in some of the biggest games in college football history. And it's not like they're been irrelevant for like a long stretch. I mean, after 2013, they were still good until the end of the Fisher era. Then they had a small down, fall, and then they've been pretty damn good for the last 3 years. So yeah, they're not as consistent as Alabama. What?
Bleep.
Yeah, they're not as
clean show. Remember, we're an E for everyone, not for explicit.
That's our phrase. We're a clean show.
Yeah, they're not as consistent as Alabama, but the fact that they're not getting credit for being a huge brand when they are is absolutely ridiculous. And it's just also, I think there's something to be said that the 4 teams that made it are either SEC, Big Ten, or future Big Ten or SEC. So I think part of this, whether you want to call it conspiracy or not, I think they wanted to box out the ACC because we know that we're barreling towards a 2 super conference college football sometime in the near future. And Big Ten and SEC clearly are the 2 premier conferences, the 2 premier brands, and Washington's going to the Big Ten and Texas is going to the SEC. So it tied a nice little bow for them to be able to add those 4 teams in. And it's not to say that Texas and Alabama aren't great teams. They are. But if you're undefeated like Florida State, conference champion, undefeated, and the way that they're able to get these wins, they deserve it. I think they actually are one of the best 4 teams talent-wise. Defensively, I think they'd give any team they played a lot of problems and could pull off an upset, in the playoff. But yeah, I think the brands won, or, I think the Texas thing, they've never been in the playoffs. There was that kind of, that story behind that. And then you have Alabama, they beat, big bad Georgia. Everyone doubted Nick Saban and now he's back. So I think they went with those brands and those storylines, and yeah, it's a farce.
Well, and I'll say this too. Our good friend Ben Stout has joined the show. As I've mentioned, we're going to have him on for his hoops, but he talks a lot of football too. So I'm going to bring Ben in a little early because he's chomping at the bit to talk about this. And I'm going to say this as well. When it comes to, and there's Ben. Hey, Ben.
Hey, Ben.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
All right. It's going great. Alan is waxing poetic on everything college football playoff. He hates everything. He wants to burn it all down. And Ben, the tall glass of Stout, joins the show. Look, you even got your own tagline there. I don't know if you noticed that, Ben. I'll say this, Alan. One of the things that I think is of note here is the timing of the NCAA president coming out and saying, hey, we might blow all these conferences up anyway for a consolidation of brands through the NIL version. So that would be a way for them to reorganize and consolidate brands. I think that works well for everybody involved. If TV's happy, if the conferences, the major brands are happy, then the conferences will be happy and people will get squeezed out. You saw that with the Pac-12. All right, Ben, you had some things you wanted to say on this. So I'm going to give you the floor and let you wax poetic on your thoughts on the playoff and whether, the 4 best teams or the 4 most deserving teams or whatever they want to come up with for their particular brand picks for this particular playoff game was the right move. So the floor is yours, my friend.
Yeah, I know you guys, I'm sure you guys have been talking about this for a while, so I'll try to be as brief as I possibly can, be on a topic that is very hot right now.
There's no brief in this topic. So you say what you think.
No, there's definitely not. Friend. And I'll preface it by saying, obviously I bleed black and gold. There's no doubt about that. I'll say that I grew up just as big of an FSU fan as UCF. My grandfather went to FSU when he retired from the Army, and my uncle went there as well as cousins also. So our family is a big UCF fan, or UCF family, I should say. I have aunt and uncles that graduated from UCF when there was FTU, but also a huge part of my family is FSU fans as well. So I've been really paying close attention to FSU this year as well. like I do every season, and been to a few games. I went to the Duke game. I went to the Wake Forest game, and I think when it comes to the playoffs and it comes to how FSU got completely jobbed in this is a number of different things that I've either thought of or heard in the last week, and a few of those are, it's always been the four most deserving teams, or at least as close as possible to the four most deserving teams. The whole narrative that they always say, we're always trying to get the four best teams, it's always been used as kind of a scapegoat or a tiebreaker or whatever you want to call it, to obviously to leave UCF out in 2017, as the only undefeated team in the country at that point. So it was used in 2018 against UCF. It was almost like they were relieved when Mackenzie Milton went down and got hurt. I almost feel like that kind of hurt FSU in this year, because it was like, hey, we've used the excuse before and it kind of worked, so why not, right? But this FSU team this year, I mean, and we've seen college football playoff championship teams, the teams that actually won the whole thing, win for this reason and this reason alone. It had nothing to do with the quarterback in the past. We've had teams that have special defenses, like completely, dominate in the college football playoff, not because of their quarterback, but because their defense was special and generational and on a roll. And you can't watch FSU football over the last 4 weeks, especially, but really all year. I mean, it started with the LSU game to start out the season. The reason why they beat the eventual Heisman Trophy winner, they beat them down in that game on a neutral site, is because their defense played amazing. And people always wanted to talk. What was wild to me is that they played against a Louisville team in the ACC championship that had averaged a lot of points and put up a ton of yards. And everybody was talking about how good their offense was, and their defense held them to nothing. Play after play after play. Every time they had to make a play, they did. And it's like the committee didn't even care about that. It's like, instead of saying, oh, it was their third string quarterback, and that offense really was different than what we had seen under Jordan Travis or even Tate Rodemaker, which, by the way, that third string quarterback wouldn't have played in the playoffs. It would be their second string quarterback, Tate Rodemaker. And they want to say that that offense isn't good enough to play in the playoffs, but it's like, what about the defense? Well, that defense is good enough to beat anybody, certainly to keep any team in the country, in a game, that's for sure. And so I just think that it was any reason that it was put forth, as to why that they were kept out, I think is a bunch of BS. And I'll just say one last thing, because this was somebody else brought this up, and I wish I could give them credit. It was just like a TikTok video or something that I saw on this topic that talked a lot about the defense, just like I did. But one of the things that I think blows up the whole narrative of, we decided that Florida State wasn't good enough to be in the top four, so we kept them out. Like, that was what they said. But I think one of the things that destroys that whole narrative is that if that was the case, and the reason why you put Alabama in is because they were the SEC champion that beat the number one team in the country, the team that you thought was the best team in the country all season. So if that's the reason why you put Alabama in, then why did you rank Florida State ahead of Georgia?
So
I think that's the number one thing that blows up the whole argument.
So, Ben, the whole Georgia thing, we mentioned that earlier, right? So one of the things about the whole Georgia thing is that team won 29 straight. They beat their teams convincingly. They have a stellar defense. To me, if anything, I think it's a bigger job, Like I could accept FSU being left out more if they put Georgia in. But I understand why they couldn't, because they had just gotten beat by Alabama.
Yeah, by 3 points.
By 3 points, right? I understand why they did what they did, but at the same time, I think I could understand FSU being left out more if Georgia, if we're talking about objectively the best teams in college football, Georgia is one of those 4. And I would put them over Texas. I would put them over Alabama.
Yeah, well, I'm with you. And I think it was just like Cincinnati had to have everything fall in place like last season in order to make the playoff.
Too.
What's that?
Houston did too when they played.
2 seasons ago, I should say. Yeah, 2 seasons ago. They had to have everything fall in place in order for them to make the playoffs. Like just like that being the case. This season, the chaos scenario, the scenario that every FSU fan wanted to avoid going into the final, playoff rankings, is they didn't want Georgia to lose like that game. I mean, it was the chaos scenario that like FSU fans didn't want. And the reason was because a lot of them knew what actually happened was going to happen, is that they were saying, well, we can't leave the SEC out. For some reason, the college football playoff can't leave the SEC out. Oh, my God, that would be just terrible. So they can't leave the SEC out. And so we have to put the SEC champion in. But all of a sudden, oh, man, now they got a problem, right? If they put the SEC champion, they got one loss. And who's the other team? Oh, yeah, it's a one-loss Texas team. And so, yeah, I mean, it just kind of became a foregone conclusion that they were going to put both Texas and Alabama in. And I just, at the end of the day, it's just a horrible, decision that was made.
There's, you're kind of delving into what I said before, which is, when it comes to making that decision, right? And what brands to put in, right?
Yeah.
And it's ESPN's playoff alone, and they didn't get to 12 because of the ACC. This is their last time to cash out on these huge ratings advertising dollars. So who do you put in? You've got to put Alabama or Georgia in. You put Texas in because they've got a huge fan base. FSU's fan base is kind of dwindled. And their following has kind of dwindled after Jimbo left.
I don't know, man. It's
the ratings.
I don't want you guys to rehash the conversation. I get it. I kind of came in the green room in the tail end of that conversation. I don't want you guys to have to rehash it, and I don't need to extend it that much longer. It's just, and I agree with you. I mean, I get it. Alabama is Alabama. I would argue that Florida State has a bigger brand than Georgia. I mean, by a mile, actually. But Alabama's Alabama, and I get that. And Georgia's, would have been the defending, potentially defending 3-time national champion, which would have been something very, very special. And I get that. So, to think that Florida State doesn't have a brand is crazy. But I also will say I agree with you that the narrative was pushed by ESPN from the moment that Alabama looked like they were going to win that game. Like when it looked like Alabama was going to take it, almost like the email came down from the top and everybody was ready with their talking points. Like we see it in politics a lot, right? Like how why are all of these talking heads on TV all talking about they're saying the same line, right? Because we all know that those things are coming from a central source. It was wild to watch the lead up to the ACC championship game, and I mean it was like, oh yeah, it doesn't really matter. Like why even play the game? Like they're not going to make it in now that Alabama's won. Like it was so wild to see everybody say it. Like on that panel before the ACC championship game, they're sitting there right on the field, like they're there they're there like right outside the field of the ACC championship game, and they're talking like this game doesn't matter. And one last thing I'll say is this is not my original comment, but I thought it was a good one. Is that back in the days of the BCS, which I'm not saying that that's a perfect system, or I'm not trying to go backwards. That's for sure. But even up until I would say this season, like you could really make the argument that in all of sports, like college football had the most important regular season. That was always always like the tagline, right? Nobody has a more important regular season than college football. And when you look at those student athletes in the eyes, and like you can't say that this season, like, because FSU, they beat every opponent in front of them in multiple different ways. They beat it when they had to, they're losing to Duke at halftime, and I turn to my dad and I say, FSU is going to win this game by 3 touchdowns. And he's like, what? It's like they've been playing like garbage. I'm like, no, he's going to tell Jordan Travis, you need to take over this game. And they came out in the second half, and Jordan Travis took over the game. They won that way. Then they beat teams like Louisville and Florida. They beat them just on the backs of their defense, like just incredible play after incredible play when they needed it from their defense. They carried it in the game. So that they just won in multiple ways, and just to have that taken away from them because a committee in a boardroom where no sports are played basically just decided that didn't matter, and I think it's just a travesty. I think it's really wrong, and they can hide behind the fact that we're going to 12 teams next year and none of this crap matters. And the media, whatever the media says that matters is the only thing. There's no doubt about it that they really screwed Florida State in this situation.
Yeah. So harkens back to Mark, the voice of UCF football. They played them all. They won them all.
Yeah,
would have been in the championship, right? I mean, UCF, as UCF fans, that was the same argument we had, right?
Yeah.
Irrespective of anything else. All right, we do need to transition to hoops because we're 122 in, and Alan, I think, took up 35 minutes. But apparently, some things are happening in the NFL game right now that Trey's attending, but we don't care because we're here talking hoops.
No, that's not Trey. Sorry, we're live. That's Tommy Cutlets.
Oh,
man,
okay.
He's balling out. He's doing better than Jordan Love at QB, and he's doing better than Saquon Barkley at running back. Off the hoops.
All right, off the hoops we go. All right, so real quick, I figured we'd have longer to do this, so maybe we'll do a part 1 and part 2. So this is part 1 this week. Ben, share some things that NOBRA, as part of our UCF Student Re-Education segment, should know about Kirk Speraw and why he was so important to UCF basketball.
Well, I mean, when it comes to the Division I era, I mean, he was somebody who really, kind of ushered some more consistent success, kind of helped UCF really build the foundation in the Division I basketball era of, solid, really good defensive teams that were going to be extremely prepared. And we may not have the best talent on the floor, but we were going to understand any way that we could possibly beat you. You've heard me say it before, Roger. Kirk is, Coach Speraw is the. Now, I wasn't necessarily blessed with great coaches growing up, as far as great basketball minds. Like my high school coach was a pretty good coach, but he was nowhere near what I experienced once I got to UCF and got in front of Coach Speraw. But I'll say, as having that experience growing up, like there were multiple times my freshman year where Coach would say something either in preparation for a game or just before a game would start, where I would like, I could honestly remember like thinking to myself, like, holy crap, like that makes total basketball sense. Like it was from an X's and O's perspective, like he was just really intelligent on how to prepare for a team, and his assistant coaches like kind of treat off of that or kind of, you know, trickle down from that. I mean, it was just, there just wasn't a time that I could remember. I mean, you know, being a guy that was on the end of the bench, but, you know, trying his best to just, you know, help anybody that was playing, you know, big minutes to really win this game, you know, win the game that was in front of us. It was just, there wasn't a time that I didn't, you know, I could ever remember our teams being surprised on the court by something that the other team did. He just had us really prepared in practice for the games. There was moments of him being, I would say, I think from the outside looking in, you know, you would probably think he was like a big time players coach. You know, I wouldn't necessarily call him a players coach in the sense that like he, you know, like he let us get away with a lot of stuff. That's for sure. Like he was a pretty hard nosed coach in practice, but he knew how to have, you know, he knew the moments that we needed to have fun, and we did that. And we had great assistant coaches, at least in my era, that certainly helped along with that kind of stuff too. But you knew that it was important to him that we felt like we were really confident going into the games, and the best way that he knew to do that is to make sure that we were super prepared. I mean, we had a lot of talent on those championship teams in the early 2000s, but a lot of the times we had a deficit when it came to, you know, some of the teams that we were playing against, and we were able to make up that deficit, and more so because we were just really prepared for our opponent at each night. And it was a requirement to play your butt off and, you know, play as hard as possible, but also play intelligent. I'll say one last thing, that just a kind of an insider thing that I remember he said, is we were getting prepared for the ASUN tournament my sophomore year, the year 2004, where had a great regular season, broke the school record for wins in a row. And then we went into the conference tournament as the 3 seed, because Belmont and Troy State were really good at that time as well. And we were like a game behind them or something like that. And he said something in the preparation for the tournament before we had left. We were watching game film, and he said, what do you guys think is going to like give us the edge? What do you think is going to, like, you know, who's going to win this tournament? And I threw out a cliche. I believe it was me that spoke up, and I kind of threw out a cliche. It's like, it's the team who wants it more, you know? And that's a cliche thing to say, you know, the team that wants it more. Right. And a lot of coaches would have been like, yeah, that's the one, you know, that's it, you know, the team that wants it more. And he brushed it off in like a really good way. He didn't like totally shut me down, but he was just like, no, it's not about the team that wants it more, because the team that's going to win this tournament, if you don't want it, you're not even going to be close to the end of this tournament. Like if you're not, all these teams want to win it. Like they want it bad, you know? And he said, but it's about the team that can harness those emotions and execute the right game plan that is going to win this thing. Executing the right game plan in the big moments, that's what's going to win this thing. And so it just kind of, that kind of thing just stuck with me. You know, it stuck with me in life. You know, it's just, you know, once you get to a certain level in anything in life, it kind of, you know, everybody kind of wants it at a high level. But are you going to be prepared, and are you going to execute the plan that you put forth for yourself or for your company or for whatever, your team? Then, you know, that's what will set you apart. And that was something that kind of reminded me there.
All right. Wise words for Nobra and the rest of the student population at You Can't Finish Under Construction Forever and a few other acronyms that we all learned.
Yeah.
But that's actually a good pivot point for us, because this last game that we just watched with Ole Miss, I think one of the things I said in text talk was, who wants it more? Right. And and then you came back with the execution in the right moments. And I think that was the difference in the game on this game. It wasn't who wanted it more. I think UCF proved in this game against Ole Miss that, hey, they wanted this game. They fought to literally the last 6 seconds of this game.
Oh, yeah.
Defensively, they turned it up in the second half. You watch that last sequence where we got the steal, then we blocked the inbounds. We got the shot off. It got blocked, and then had we had 1 second left, we would have been going into overtime, because we were there to put the ball back when it was blocked. So, this game was not a who wanted it more game. This was who executed fundamentals at the right time. And quite frankly, Sellers having a terrible game, the worst game probably of this entire season. And that's not on him.
Yeah,
everybody gets
tough
a
timing
bad
on that
game.
part. Yeah.
But the timing, love to get your take on the game as we kind of talk about this, and then we'll get into a little bit more of the details. But what did you see on this Ole Miss game, and what is the takeaway as both a player and a coach?
Yeah, so I think from a really positive standpoint, or at least I'll try to spin something that was not great for us that was actually a positive in the long run, I guess you could say, is that we played a team that was undefeated, that should be ranked come next week. I'd imagine. I imagine they'll be ranked come next week. Should get a lot more attention than it has, I believe. But they're an undefeated team that came into our building, and they were hot. They are hot, and we took them down to the very, as you just mentioned, Roger, the very last second, while shooting under 20% from the three on the game. And I say that because we took a team like this, an undefeated team, to the wire, that poor of a shooting performance from the game. And I know that during our text talk during the game, and I agree with you, Roger. I know that you've talked about 3-point shooting being a little bit of an issue on this team. We don't have like a pure knockdown shooter. I mean, I think on the season, I have the stats up here. I got to pull them up, but I believe Jalen Sellers has taken the most threes on our team, but he's shooting under 30% from the three, and so that's got to improve. I'll say about the 3-point shooting in this game though against Ole Miss, with the exception of a short period of time, maybe about 15-minute mark in the second half. Okay, so 5 minutes into the second half, there was a little bit of a run that Ole Miss went on, and I thought that it was a short run, but I thought that UCF might have. Sometimes what happens in the Dawkins area in particular, the last 3 or 4 years, when the other team starts to press and go on a run, not press like full court press, but kind of impose their will and go on a run, we kind of fall back into this one-on-one game, and sometimes that results in bad shots. So with the exception of that about 3 or 4 minute stretch where we did take some bad shots, in particular from three, that were contested, and we kind of fell back into this one-on-one game. With the exception of that, I would say we took 22 attempts from three in this game, and I would say a good 18 of those were quality looks. They were, for the most part, our guards getting downhill, like Darius Johnson or even Jalen Sellers to a point, but really Darius Johnson and Shamari Allen getting downhill, getting into the paint, and they're kicking out to shooters on the outside, and we're getting good looks, and they just don't fall sometimes. And this game, I think I think that if we're being, not even rose-colored glasses, but really, kind of speaking honestly and objectively and watching that game, the majority of those shots were good looks and looks that you'll take on any given day. They just didn't go in. I mean, you got guys like Tierno Silla who have certainly settled for the three-point shot in the past seasons, but this season he's hitting it, but he's also doing some good things in the mid-range and by the basket. I think he's really stepped his game up. I mean, he went 0 for 3. Jalen Sellers, as you mentioned, Roger, goes 0 for 5 from the three-point line. I mean, he just struggled, and that's going to happen, especially when you go throughout the season of kind of carrying us. But overall, I was really encouraged by what I saw. You had some stretches where, some short stretches where we kind of had to get it together, and Coach Dawkins had to use a couple timeouts there in the beginning of the second half that he probably wished he had towards the end. But he had to stop those little mini runs that they went on. And for the most part, you saw continuously throughout the game that this team responded to those runs. I mean, they stayed in it. They got the stops when they needed to, and I'm sure we'll get to it, but Marcellus Avery he made 3. If we would have won this game, we'd be talking about Marcellus Avery. In my opinion, we'd be talking solely about the 3 or 4 defensive plays that he made in the last 2 minutes of that game.
Well, him and Shamari Allen.
Shamari Allen too, yeah. I mean, that dunk was number 1 on SportsCenter today in a losing effort. Number 1 play in the country in a losing effort. That dunk coming down the lane was just. It was a game changer. I mean, it was the exact spark we needed at the right time. He kind of took it upon himself. So that you're right, Roger. I mean, 10 minutes left in the game. That stretch where we really came together. That dunk was part of it. There was his 3 defense. Or 4 plays in a row that Shamari Allen did a lot. Yeah, on both ends of the floor, and then down the stretch, 2 minutes to go. Marcellus Avery was special. I mean, the 3 or 4 plays that he made in a row on the defensive end were just right after he hit that 3 to bring us back into it. We got some pieces on this team, so that's exciting. That
was, a couple things just to build off what you're saying, and I'll let the other guys kind of take the floor a little bit here. Jacksonville, when we played them, we won 94-52. We shot 45% from 3, right? That's the missing component for us to add to our paint presence, because we've got a really, really good group of guys that had good paint presence. And one of the things I said in the text thread, from the onset, we had a plan, and Dawkins said after the game that they never changed their plan. And what was it? Attack the paint to get them to foul because of their bigs, and get their bigs off the floor. And that was the first thing I texted you guys. What was it, 2 minutes in, 3 minutes in that we were doing, right? I saw that. And it was a smart play because they had 2 7-footers. So if we can get them off the floor, they don't have the depth in size that we do, right? That was an advantage for us. The second thing that really hurt us in the first half, but not so much in the second half. They kept putting Flanagan or somebody else out at the 3-point line, and then collapsed everybody to the other side, did a cross-court pass, and then they had a 3-point shot. This team that we played, Ole Miss, only averaged 3 3-pointers a game coming into this game. They shot 5. They knocked down 5 within right after the half. And then we locked down on that. That's been a bugaboo for our defense the entire year. But what we did to offset that is we were pressing. And I love to see the press. And the last game and last show, we talked about the fact that we I mentioned that I hated to see them trapped. They had these guys trapped in great positions, but then they let them out of it, right? This game, they didn't do that. And even though there was a few 3-point buckets that came off of that, right, it really was a heroic effort for them to be able to do that. I mean, the one in the corner where he lost the handle, and it was going
they made
out of
tough
bounds,
shots.
and then he threw it across court and they got a 3-pointer, but they adjusted even then. So I'm seeing progress defensively in our effort. We've never had the depth. And I don't know if you guys remember when Johnny first came in, his thing was transition offense, and we're going to play aggressive brand of basketball that includes the press. And we're going to press all game. He has not had the depth to do that. The thing that this showed me, and we even sprinkled in a new player this week, right? This team has depth because it didn't matter what configurations we were going in there defensively. We had a lineup that worked against their lineup each and every time. And there were 5 different players on the floor. So I think from a coach's perspective, right now, we have the best overall team that we've had, not necessarily the best players, but the best overall team that we've had in a really long time with depth, which will go a long way as we get into conference play, especially considering these guys were all thrown together. I've not seen a team gel like this in a very, very long time to gel this quickly. Usually it takes a season to get where they're at. So,
and I'll just quickly say about the depth. I think the first time, because we have had depth in the last even 5 years or so since we made that big run, but we have had depth, but this is the first time that we have true quality depth. I mean, Omar Payne is a great big man, but there's no reason why guys like Chichi Avery or Diallo can't start over him given the right matchup, right? I'm not saying there was any reason why he wouldn't start. I'm just saying that there's so many different lineups that this team can build, and you don't lose. There's hardly any drop off when certain players come out of the game. I mean, there's even certain times in this game, this yesterday, and in previous games this season where Darius Johnson just wasn't getting it done, and we put in a different point guard, and it's worked out. Worked out great. We went on runs.
Shamari Allen in this game transitioned
Shamari
to
Allen
point
in this
guard.
game. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. So I agree with you. This is the first time we've had depth in the past, but this is the first time that we've had some really quality depth where there's not a whole lot of drop off, and you pair that with a guy like Sellers who can just take over a game from an offensive standpoint at any time, and that kind of true pure scorer mixed in with a lot of players that are that can shine at any moment because they're good players in their own right, and they're kind of stars in their role. I think that could be a combination that surprises people. Obviously, we got a lot of consistent, tough matchups, coming up in a short period of time. But anyways,
And the bad part about it all is a lot of these guys are 1-year players. I would have loved to see these guys together for a little bit longer. But all right, Josh, you've been nodding your heads. I know you're a basketball guy like us, so I'm going to give you the floor. What are your thoughts on all of this?
So, I mean, you covered a lot of it. I was at the game, and I said some stuff in the chat too. I was at the game, and the one thing, and Johnny talked about this after the game. I think it was on some social media. The 2 biggest things I saw as the problems in this game, and there weren't a lot. One of them was they didn't quite take it to them right from the jump. And there was 2 runs that were mostly the downfall. It was the first run, about 8 points in the first half, where at that point, I believe, Ben, we're talking about it, it seemed to go, usually it's Darius Johnson going one-on-one and trying to drive, and it works a lot, but sometimes it just feels a little too sped up and not running the offense as Johnny Dawkins wants it. But it's interesting. There was a play where a couple people came up the set picks, dropped out too quick. Johnny's turning around and yelling at not yelling, but talking to his own coaches, and then Darius Johnson blows by a guy and scores a layup, right? So sometimes those things happen too. But those 2 runs hurt because we couldn't quite get over the top, and I think part of that is because we're kind of waiting for the game to come to us. But we can't do that in this conference. But what I said in the text talk in a couple different ways. Like this bodes, I already talked about in this podcast how this game is going to be the litmus test for the rest of the season. And for the most part, we passed. I mean, that was as good of a game as I've seen since a while. Like some of the really good UCF versus Memphis games where it's tight and down to the wire in the American. I will say,
I think this team, though, a lot of those past teams we played against Memphis wipes the floor with those old Memphis teams that used to give us fits.
I tend to agree. I will
the
say
Lawson
this.
brothers, all those guys, they would have been shut down by this defense.
There is a lot of positives. I mean, again, some of this, like Sellers was having some mid-range nice jumpers. It was quite good, but he was losing the ball and driving at times. He couldn't get his three ball up. It was always contested. He definitely was not as confident or comfortable as he normally was, and that might have been Ole Miss's. That might have been part of their game plan, is take him out of it specifically. I don't know that part.
I think part of their game plan was being really physical with Jalen Sellers. I think that was part of his frustration and part of his thing that threw him off a bit. Now, obviously, I don't want to use too many excuses, but I think we all know, and watching that game, I mean, there was a lot of contact on both sides, but towards down the stretch, it was, I mean, they
let him play the first half, but the second half, like especially even on that last sequence, you could see the ref did not want to make the decision on whether this game was going to go into overtime or not by not calling that Shamari Allen.
I think you gotta give him a chance to put him on the line. I know we don't get. I'm sorry, Josh. Go ahead.
No. All I'm saying. So here, that's where I was going. I can say this because I am not a player, nor am I a part of the team. The refs hosed us a bit. And I can say that from multiple different things you might have not seen on TV. Like there were some times where 33, who, 7-foot player, Ben, you probably didn't body people like that, but there were times at that ending sequence where I don't know if it was on camera or not because I was there, where he threw someone out of the way, and when the refs went back to look at it, they weren't looking at that part of the play. They were looking at the play where DJ tried to swipe the ball over top the guy, and that's a foul. Got it, yes. But they didn't look when 33 was just shoving people out of the way, which he can. He's a big human being, right?
Right.
But you can't do that. There were a couple times where it's definitely a call both ways type of deal, and UCF just seemed to not get any of the whistles that Ole Miss was getting in the last 4 or 5 minutes. It was very, very frustrating as fans. You probably heard the boos and the fans getting into, because it just things. There was one play, again, you probably didn't see on TV, where we get the ball, before we're even driving the ball to the other end of the court. I forgot who it was. It might have been Cheech or someone, gets smacked on top of the head by someone who is trying to get the ball, and nothing. I mean, just like if you did that in the street, someone probably would have punched you, and just nothing. And I'm not saying we didn't see it. The back ref was walking it up, but anyway, it's just
it was a tough game. Like key moments, and then the other part about it is, though, UCF's got to shoot better free throw percentage. I mean, that's ridiculous. I said this in the chat. At the end of the day, I don't understand how any player gets to that level and shoots 40, 50% free throws, unless they're like a Taco Fall type or, that kind of thing.
Diallo's part of that too. I mean, Diallo's just not hitting.
I mean, you look at the individual, and I get it. Like we shot 65% from the free throw line this game, and that doesn't look great as a team. But you kind of look at the more individual percentages. I mean, Omar Payne goes 2 for 4. He goes 50%, but you know, he goes up to the line, he makes one, he misses one a couple times, right? Like he doesn't shoot many free throws, which is weird because he's a big man.
He hasn't been in the games very long because he's fouled out and had to sit within the first 2 or 3 minutes of the game. This is the first one he hasn't.
Right, and I guess what I'm saying is, it looked really bad when is it Antoine Jones?
Yes,
Antoine Jones, right? Yeah, Antoine Jones. For some reason, like in my mind, like that wasn't right. You know, he gets his first action of the season, and then I think he missed he went 1 for 3 on his first 3 attempts, and you're like, oh man, something's going on here. And then all of a sudden, he makes 2 or 3 in a row, right? And so he winds up again 3 for 6 for him. So, but everyone else is just kind of pretty solid. Wise, I mean, Jalen Sellers goes 5 for 7. DJ goes 5 for 8. You know, you'd like to see that 6 for 8, 7 for 8. You know, from your point guard, but still, it's a little bit. I don't know. I don't want to call it nitpicky because free throws have been an issue for our teams in the past. I don't quite see it as a big deal with this team yet. A big problem with this team yet. I don't know if it necessarily killed us in this game. I mean, more so than the just missing open shots on offense. And
we don't have anybody automatic like BJ Taylor where he's got the rock.
No, we don't have a guy
where we're going to drive the paint and we're going to get the foul. We know we're going to put him on the line and he's going to make both shots. We don't have that. None of these guys do.
Yeah, I mean, the main guys with the tendency to be aggressive and get downhill and try to get to the basket and draw a lot of fouls, we've ever since BJ Taylor, we've been looking for that guy, right? Like we're looking for a guard. Like we've said it since, maybe unfairly, since Darius Johnson came in as a freshman. Before he came in as a freshman, you looked at his high school highlight tapes and you say, all right, here's a guy that's got a good size as a guard. You know, he likes to get in the paint. He likes to finish through contact. And you're just praying that he's BJ Taylor. And I think that's pretty unfair probably for DJ to live in that shadow. But, hey, I mean, that's what happens when you follow a great player like BJ.
That's what happens when you're playing Big 12 basketball and you're D1.
Well, yeah, certainly, Roger.
It's more than
what
one.
I'm just saying is the improvement from the line is what we haven't quite seen out of Darius Johnson. We've actually seen him improve on getting in the paint and finishing through contact or making the right decision for his teammates. But we need to see a more improvement from the line, especially when he's the one getting to the line the most. I'd agree with that.
Yeah, I think the big thing you said there was he's getting better at the decision making. Last year he was so wild. Late
even multiple games in the beginning of this season, there was an issue with him turning the ball over. But I feel like in the last few weeks, I think he's been challenged by Dawkins to clean that up. I think it's been a real focus on his part. And I agree that, I mean, in this game, I thought he was great. I mean, obviously we blew out Jacksonville the other night, but he was great in that game as well. I mean, he's stepped up his decision making a lot better because we can't survive the conference slate if our point guard is turning the ball over like he was for stretches at the beginning of this season, but certainly in years past.
All right, Alan, our ace reporter from the Central Florida Future, who started watching basketball again. What did you see this game? I'm sorry. I've been trying to get you in. We're all just super excited about what we saw because it was such a great game. But what was your takeaways as our ace reporter?
I never stopped watching UCF basketball. I just haven't been as passionate about it was when I was in school, when it was my beat for the Central Florida Future and Night News. But yeah, admittedly, not as much as I'm into the football team. Sorry, Ben. Don't mean to offend you.
Oh, no, you don't have to apologize to me, Alan. I get it.
But yeah, no, I mean, for me, it was interesting. I thought that they won a couple of key battles there. I mean, outside of obviously the shooting, which was glaring from free throw, obviously from the 3-point percentage as well. But, we were able to pretty much dominate points in the paint, and then we out-rebounded them by 10. So to have those kind of key statistics, one, it's disappointing to walk away that game, with a loss, but my takeaway was kind of a little bit what Josh said. I think we kind of passed the eye test to some degree of being able to beat an undefeated team, an Ole Miss team that was 8-0 going into this game, in a solid SEC basketball conference. And really were kind of that Duke-ish type of miss there at the end from winning that game. It was unfortunate. Obviously, they did make a lot of mistakes and they didn't shoot well. And I think free throws obviously hurt us. And I think that ending sequence there with the free throws, where I think he was probably trying to miss that second free throw, but then it bounced in there off the top.
Missing that first one killed us for sure. Like, because he's going out of that timeout. Johnny is saying, make the first one, miss the second, and then he missed that first one, and it just kind of blew everything up. That was just bad. That's
exactly right. And I think free throws I've said this in the last pod, that free throws have kind of been a problem for UCF basketball for a number of years. There was in that BJ Taco area, there had some good years, but I mean, they're shooting under 70% this year. And, they're, I think, third to last in the Big 12 in free throws. And I think the charity stripe, you have to be able to make the shots there. But my question for you, Ben, I mean, how much confidence, being able to hang tough. I mean, it was at home, but being able to hang tough with an Ole Miss team that was undefeated and nearly walking away, does that give you, some more confidence as we get closer to the Big 12 schedule? Because, let's be honest, at this point, we've been kind of beating up on bad teams like Jacksonville and stuff like that. But does this game give you some confidence that we can maybe hang, maybe not the Kansases of the world, but at least maybe the middle to upper middle tier of the Big 12?
Yeah, I mean, I think my thought on what we can do in the conference hasn't necessarily changed from the time that we've talked last on this pod, as far as being able to compete with almost any team in the conference, and being able to hang with them and battle it out and give ourselves a chance towards the end of these games to pull it off, right? I think that there's a bottom tier in this conference, which obviously, preseason wise, we were certainly a part of. And I think that even those who have been paying attention would probably say that we're probably still in that bottom four opinion wise outside of maybe our UCF bias, I guess. They probably would say that we're still in that kind of bottom four of the conference, right? So there's teams that certainly in that bottom tier that we could win any of those games, no doubt. That middle tier that you're talking about, even teams like that we're going to face first on the road. I'm not saying that we're going to go into Kansas State and go ahead and take that, but there's teams that we'll play against that are kind of in the middle of this conference that are going to be very difficult. But the way that this team has shown for long stretches during games, to be able to move the ball really well. You mentioned rebounding in this past game against Ole Miss. I mean, it was not only we out-rebounded by 10, but we got 18 offensive rebounds against a team that had 2 7-footers in it. I know, and I agree with Roger. I mean, our game plan was to take those guys out of the game and come at them. But hey, I mean, because we executed that game plan well, I mean, it was the reason why we got 18 offensive rebounds. I mean, I think we had 11 offensive rebounds in the first half, which is crazy. I mean, there's a reason why we were in that game by shooting well or shooting bad from the outside, but all those points in the paint where a lot of those were second chance points. I mean, that's a great stat, and one that I think that they can build upon is really being active on the offensive glass. I think is going to be able to help us stay with anybody. I mean, people love to look at Houston, and rightfully so. I mean, they're an excellent team. But the last decade, they've been excellent because every single season they have been top 5, top 10 in the country in offensive rebounds per game. I mean, their rebounding differential. And I don't know if you remember, but or I don't know if you realize, but just by looking at some of those Houston teams that have been there in the last decade, it's not like they have Akeem Olajuwon there. They don't have 7-footers. They've got 6'8", 6'9" guys that are super athletic and they get good positioning and they get rebounds. and they really, really fight on the glass. And we have 6'11" and 7-footers on this team that are excellent positional rebounders. They're also great, shot blockers. They're active on defense. I'm talking about obviously Payne and Diallo. And then when you add a piece like Chichi Avery, who's super long and can play multiple positions and just very good defensively himself. And then hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on wood, whatever you want to say, hopefully right before conference starts, we add the best one-on-one post defenders you're gonna see in this conference in CJ Walker to that lineup. We've got a defensive lineup that can keep us in a lot of games. And then you talk about how Johnson, if he can be smart with the basketball and get into the paint and drive and kick, and and then obviously Jalen Sellers, continue to be a true 3-level scorer, improve his outside shooting a little bit better, or even get him in position where he doesn't have to kind of create off the dribble. Like maybe he, we get a little bit better, set plays that kind of get him the ball in space a little bit more. I think we will provide ourselves a chance to be in and win some of these conference games. I said before the season that my heart of hearts, I'm expecting about 4 wins, to be honest, in this conference. But I don't see how I won't be that surprised if we've got 8 conference wins. I'm not saying I'm expecting that, because I think there's a big difference, and we've all fallen into the trap in the preseason, non-conference with, teams, especially in the Dawkins era, where we look great in the non-conference.
Right.
So I'm certainly not saying that I'm expecting, 9 conference wins, which would basically,
the Jones era.
Or the Jones era, for that matter. You're right about that. We haven't been great. We're not great in the CUSA or the American Conference, really in conference play. But I wouldn't be surprised if we stretch to that. I think I'd be disappointed if we were at 2 conference wins at the end of the season. I'd be about what I expected at 4, and I think that we have the potential to capture as many as 8 or 9. I've been, as we've all said on this pod, like I've been very impressed with this group, the way that they play together, the talent that we have, the length that we have, so the thing is, the Dawkins era, like, we've been excellent at half-court defense and turning that into transition offense. Like, that's been our 2 main things in the Dawkins era that UCF has, like, kind of hung their hat on. When we had that magical team in that 2018-2019 team, right? Like, they were like, those 2 things were just so far amplified, because you had Taco in the middle of that half-court defense. You had guys like BJ Taylor and Terrell Allen and Aubrey Dawkins that could run the break and, drive and kick and shoot threes. And then obviously if they had to set up in the half court, they could kind of figure out a way to get it into Taco or, inside out game. They had that, right? And I feel like this team, while it's a way different makeup than that team, you can't replace guys like BJ and Taco, that's for sure. They're just unique talents. But we can kind of mix it up and do multiple ways, but those 2 things we do really well on this team. We really are. Half court defense with this team is just really, really. It's just really quality half court defense. We're getting better with the press, as you said, Roger.
But that's the thing, right? So we're being way more disruptive now with that press and turning it into more turnovers, because
and transition
hurried, and into transition offense.
Or getting the clock to 20 seconds when you start your set. That's what was happening at Ole Miss almost half the game. They're getting into their set with like 19 seconds left. Also worth noting, we're talking about, maybe we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 wins. I want to level set, if people don't know how good this conference is. Number 2, Kansas. Number 4, Houston. Number 6, Baylor. Number 11, Oklahoma. Number 18, BYU. Number 19, Texas. That's 6 of the top 25 from Big 12. Let's just go to others receiving votes. Iowa State, TCU is in there. There is a significant amount of this conference that is really, really, really good.
Yeah.
And forget the fact that next year, I know 2 drop out, but number 1 Arizona pops back in, and Colorado is going to make the top 25.
And that's why, in previous years, you had the RPIs where 7 win Big 12 teams were making it to the tournament, right? So at the end of the day, what it boils down to with us in the Big 12, we have to win our out of conference, and those couple big RPI games that we have to win, because that does set us up for a tourney bid, even if we have a mediocre season within conference play.
Yeah.
And that's what we're speaking positively, rightfully so, about what happened yesterday. And I think we should be giving the team a lot of credit because they fought hard, but we didn't get the win. And you're right. That would have been a quad 2 win. The only quad one opportunity we had was Miami this year, and unfortunately, while we battled hard, we didn't win that game either. And so, you got to get those wins when you have the opportunity. Those are only 2 quad 1, quad 2 games in the net so far this season. And so that's how you build a resume: is you get those wins, because we've all been sitting there on Selection Sunday, and they're talking about why they put in the 64th and 63rd and 64th team, or the team that was first, or what do they call it, last 4
double
in, right?
Teams. Yeah
the last 4 in, and the reason, and they always do point back to, well, you remember back in late November, early December, when they got that win against X team, like that's always what they're pointing to, on top of the conference wins that we need to get. And last thing I'll say is, on this front, on the conference front, is when you have a non-conference schedule in the way that this is set up, where we haven't left the state of Florida basically, except for one short period of time, and we've got a number of lesser teams mixed in, and then about every 2 weeks or so we play a top tier team, right, which is what we've had this season. The biggest difference between that, and we saw it on the football side, we knew it on the football side, is that there isn't that 3-4 game stretch where you're able to kind of know that if you play your game, you're going to win the game. Like you're just fine. There isn't that in the Big 12. Every single night is the reason why it's the most difficult. Is the reason why these top tier conferences are just so difficult to get through from a basketball perspective. I mean, you got 30 games, right? And you got about 20 games in conference. And every single one of those 20 games are a slugfest. I mean, if you don't come ready to play, you are not going to have a chance to win the game. Whereas not show up at a few teams in the American Conference even and still figure out a way to be right there in the end of it. Like, you won't be there against any mid-level team in the Big 12. I mean, think about it. Like, Cincinnati was a perennial top 3, top 4 opponent for us in the American. And they're like one of those 3 or 4 teams that I just talked about that we should look at and say, okay, we're at least walking into the arena, even on paper, with somebody objectively can't say that, like, they're for sure a better team than we are. And there won't be many games like that.
Partly, I think that's the Cronin effect, unfortunately, for Cincinnati. But
well, yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe that's a bad example, but you understand what I'm saying.
It's like Huggy Bear at West Virginia.
There are no nights off.
Yeah, well, like Huggy Bear at West Virginia, you know what I mean? That's another one. They've seen a drop off with that. But all right, guys, we've talked a lot of hoops, and Ben's going to come back He's committed to coming back to us throughout the season. So we're excited to have him back actually for next week's student re-education. Josh has been dying to talk about Kirk's jerks. So I want him to have that conversation. I would love Ben to talk about what it was like at that time in that era as a athlete, the fun side of it. And then maybe also a little bit about the difficulties of being an athlete at that time at UCF, because it's a lot different than it is today. I mean, one of the things we talked about with Chance was simple things like Taco always getting the emergency exit seat because it was always flown commercial. So Ben, I imagine you got that same treatment too. So
yeah, I even got first class a few times. It was nice. It was fun walking past the coaches and saying, "Oh, sorry guys, I got to take it." You know, they said it was open for me. So that even happened a few times on our flights. But yeah, we can talk about that fun stuff too.
Awesome. So Ben, if you want to hang out for the rest of the show, it'll be relatively quick. You can. If not, we'll see you next week. Completely up to you. Yeah, no, I'm good. I'll go ahead and I'll hit the road here and hit the bed here. But I appreciate you guys having me on as always. It's always great talking with you about anything UCF or anything sports related, especially our hoops team. And so hopefully, coming on the show next week and certainly the following weeks, we'll talk about some UCF wins. All right. Awesome. Absolutely. Thanks again. And, all right. Thanks, guys. Have a great night. See you next week. All right, guys. That brings us towards the end of the show. Always a pleasure to talk with Ben. Ben and I can talk hoops for hours and hours and hours and hours. We have for the past probably 5 years, 6 years on air. So it's always a great time, and he's just as passionate as we are. Obviously, he was a former player. However, we do need to keep the show going. So let's go ahead and move into Alan's Oxymoronic Stat of the Week. Alan, take it away, please.
Well, as promised, I wanted to do it about basketball because I think it's a little too early to do it for the bowl game, the Gasparila Bowl. So I wanted to stress just the free throw shooting that we kind of talked about here on this podcast, and I've lamented about it over the years as UCF's poor free throw shooting. So this year, UCF actually has the third most free throw attempts in the Big 12 conference. So they are actually getting to the line at a pretty high rate. However, they have the third lowest free throw percentage in the Big 12. They're one of 3 teams that are shooting less than 70%. So then I want to take it back for, just to look at a nice, a sample size. So I went back basically from their very first year in the American Athletic Conference to now, which is a span of 11 seasons. And UCF basketball has only shot over 75% from the line one time in the last 11 years. And I chose 75% because there was a healthy amount of teams in each of those years that did shoot over that. So it's not really arbitrary, or it's not like it's an impossible feat to shoot that. And they've actually also, in 7 of the last 11 years, shot in the 60s. So they've shot under 70% from the free throw line in 7 of the last 11 years and been in the bottom 3 in the conference in those 7 years. So this free throw shooting has been porous now for going on over a decade now. And that's my oxymoronic stat of the day. Awesome. Thank you so much. That's interesting. With as many close games, when we're talking about fundamentals, that's one of them. Wins. Yep. All right. Sounds like the football season or something. I don't know. Josh Lazar, it is time for your sometimes funny fact of the week. Well, we're getting late in the night here, or late in the pod right now. I had 2. Or late in the Giants game. Tommy Cutlip is balling right now. It's about, if you want to know when we're doing this, about 31 seconds left with a field goal to win. Hopefully that'll happen. So I have 2 things. I'm just going to go with the layup this week since we talked a lot of basketball. UCF is playing Maine coming up in basketball next week on Monday. Actually, the women are also playing on Monday too. So this should be an easy one for all of you. What former UCF president was an interim president at Maine? president was an intern president at Maine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the only president I know is John Hitt. So
I was thinking that, but especially since he said easy.
Yeah, it's a layup. Yeah, John Hitt was an interim president at Maine, and then during that time frame, he got hired here at UCF. So yeah, we're playing Maine, who had our president as an interim president. I have some really good ones. I have one that's on deck for the future. It just depends on which recruits we get. I still might use it next week too. It's something that I don't think anyone really knows about, honestly. I dug a little deep for it, but we'll see next week. I'll throw it out there. Either way, how about that?
All right, awesome. So that moves us along to our UCF Sports update. I'm going to let you, Josh, run with it as you have started doing lately. But I will say this, I'm extremely excited again about this women's basketball team. And I hope you guys are taking advantage of watching them when you can, because they are very, very, very good.
Undefeated.
Go ahead, Josh.
Undefeated, yeah. So really quick, there are only 2 sports happening until the semester starts again for UCF in spring 2024, and that's women's hoops and men's hoops. And then we get some women's track and field back in January January 12th, I believe. And the Giants win. 24-22 against Jordan Love. Sorry, gotta get that out there. All right, back to UCF hoops. UCF women's hoops remain undefeated with a 72-45 win over New Orleans. That happened on Monday of this week, and they're going to play FAU next week, 8-0. We have 2 things, and just to go even a little deeper on that, we have 2 games coming up with the women's team. They're going to be playing FAU, and they're also going to be playing Morgan State. It's back-to-back nights, the 18th and 19th. Those 2 teams have about 4 wins each right now. We hope we win, right? We had that tight Campbell game that happened, but there's a possibility with maybe 1 away game at Oklahoma that we could end up the year undefeated. And then we have this wonderful, weird January 6th thing coming up where we will be playing at home, ranked 13th or 16th, depending on the poll, Kansas State, while the men's basketball team is going out to Kansas to play Kansas on the same day. Don't ask me why we haven't had that alignment. I don't know. But women's basketball, we have a good setup going on. And Kansas State is no slouch either. Kansas State is the only team in the country right now to beat Iowa State. And if you don't know about Iowa State and Caitlin Clark, well, you're not paying attention to the sports, period. So that's going to be a tough game. Of course, we have the main game, which I led into. The men are going to be playing, men's basketball going to be playing Maine also on this coming Monday. Yeah, that's kind of what we got going on, and there is a possibility I'm going to try to make both games on Monday. We'll see. I'm going to try.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Josh, for wrapping that up for us. We had a lot of great conversation going, some spirited conversation going. We had some analysis going. Then we went into the college football playoff, and it's how should I call this? Madness, for lack of any. It should be called maybe November Madness or December Madness instead of March Madness. So it is what it is. We took a stab at that. That's a national conversation, and then we talked a lot about this hoops team, which I think we finally figured out who they're going to be, at least for now. Now, can they take these lessons and expand upon them and be even better than what they were? That question is left to be answered, but I have a lot more, how should I put this, confidence in them than I did at the beginning of the season. And, it's worth a watch, and it's certainly something to get behind, because even if they don't go undefeated, which they won't, and they haven't, this is going to be a competitive team in Big 12 conference basketball, the best basketball conference in the land. So do yourself a favor. We've got some room to grow as far as basketball fan base is concerned. Get on the train because this team is well worth your dollars and your time. So beyond that, just make sure you're keeping an eye out on our YouTube channel for the shorts that are continuing to be put out there. And make sure to like, subscribe, and follow. And of course, any feedback that you have, let us know. Go Knights and
Charge on. Man, I can't believe the Giants beat the Packers. That just